So I think at 13:02 we'll make a start. Thank you everybody for joining us for this lunchtime webinar in a series of webinars focusing on the various value-added products and services you can get from Quill. Now, when government changes legislation, I often think that they've got absolutely no idea of some of the implications of what they do. And I think the recent changes to divorce legislation are a case in point where a change is made and then there's an industry that has to follow in terms of actually making sure that the mechanics will work behind the scenes. And I'm delighted that Quill partners with a forms provider called FormEvo, and FormEvo were hot off the blocks and got all of the new forms in relation to divorce in particular up and running just as soon as they were out and understood. And that's a real credit to this company over one or two of the more legacy forms providers who have traditionally been a lot slower in terms of producing those forms. Anyway, before we get into the form detail, if we could just flick on to the next slide. I think with over 2 years of lockdowns and so on and so forth, we all understand the housekeeping arrangements. We do have a backroom team who are keeping an eye on the chat, but by all means pop a question into the chat. We'll keep an eye on that and pick those questions up later. If we also have a little WhatsApp group in the background here just to let us know what's going on. So by all means pop in questions into the chat, and if we're a small group at the end, we'll take you all off mute so we can all have a bit of a debate if it's appropriate towards the end. Okay, next slide, please. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Julian Bryan. I'm the chairman at Quill. Alongside me today, doing most of the talking, will be Paul Clyde. Paul Hello. Is the commercial director at FormEvo, on the screen in front of you. In the background and on mute for as long as we can keep him that way is Archie Courage, who is managing director at FormEvo and the font of all knowledge when it comes to the intricacies and technicalities of forms. But if we need to get into those intricacies and technicalities, we will let him into the room. Failing that, we will keep him in the background. So next slide, please, Paul. I think most of you know Quill inside out as potentially existing customers. We are a recent addition to our portfolio is that we are now an affiliate partner of the Law Society, who are effectively endorsing us as a provider of cashiering services and software. Not only do we integrate with forms, but if you ever need or cashiering services, it might just be for summer holidays, maternity leave, paternity leave, whatever, then do get in touch with us. We also provide a number of other services, including, for example, money laundering checks, for example, court bundling. So if you need your forms bundling up, we can support you with that as well. Okay, we'll just pop on to the next slide, and then it's going to be handing over to Paul. So our agenda today, very much for Paul Clyde to tell us about what's changed and what's been added to the forms library, the enhancements to some of the divorce forms through D81 and FormEvo. He'll touch on e-signature, an important element of our sort of hybrid working environment that we have, and then the roadmap for the future of divorce forms, what it's going to look like. So Paul's the expert. I'm just here to top and tail proceedings. So without further ado, over to Paul.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to everybody, and thanks very much to the Quill team for inviting us to this webinar today. So as Julian was saying, the role today is and the purpose is to talk about the developments within divorce and legal forms. Obviously, this particular webinar has been driven by the changes in legislation that came into force last month. But the topic itself is really, what does this mean for legal forms themselves? So here's a look at the new forms that have been added into the Quill Forms application. We have 12 amendments that have been put into place across the forms that you can see on the left, and then there have been 5 brand new forms that have been added into the mix. Now, I should say, when there are new forms available, we are a little bit different from some of the other forms providers in that we will look at the forms that have been released, and we will take a view on those forms in terms of whether we think we can provide any further added value to those forms. And indeed, with the forms that came through in April, that's exactly what we did. So if I can just come out of the Quill presentation, and I am going to go into Quill Forms itself. For those of you that haven't actually seen Quill Forms before, let me just give you a quick summary as to what it is. It's a full service library across all practice areas. It's 100% cloud-based, so that means there is nothing for you to do in terms of updating of forms or indeed software upgrades. It's all automatic and goes on in the background. It's a combination of electronic forms where the output is a printable PDF that can either be wet ink signed, or you can have it as an e-signed product. But it also contains the developing area of digital forms. So digital forms, the difference is that you are submitting the data from a form to a government agency, and we integrate with various government agencies. And the benefit over time will be, as more and more forms become digital, the experience from the user perspective will be that it's the same regardless of the portal. You will not need to learn and act in different ways across portals. You'll be able to just have a common process, and where possible, we will look to integrate data from one to the other. So here we are in the home screen of Quill Forms, and at an individual user level, I can see my favorites that I can set up myself. Below that, the application automatically recognizes the forms that you're using the most. And below that, you have the opportunity with your divorce forms to be able to customize them. And by that, I mean, if there are particular clauses or particular bits of information that you're always adding into the form, then you can add it once, save it as a template, and use that as your go forward form rather than just the standard version. Your draft forms are available on the right hand side. This is the forms library itself, and as I was saying, it is a full service library. But what I've done is I've assumed that in this case everyone is a divorce lawyer, and by starring the relevant areas to me, I can basically go to my FormEvo and I can just have available the relevant forms to the divorce and family practitioner. I should also say that one of the major benefits of the application within Quill Forms is it is basically gives you the ability for you to auto-populate forms from the data within your Quill case management system. So forms can be mapped from Quill to the relevant forms, so saving you time and also minimizing the opportunity for data input errors. We mentioned at the start talking about enhancements to forms. So let me take you into some existing forms that I've set up for you. The first one I wanted to talk about was the D81. So there started to be changes to the D81 in March of this year, which we had a look at. And we were utterly amazed at the advice that was coming out from the relevant agency around additional properties. And their advice is, if you had additional properties and you required extra pages, then photocopy the pages. We didn't think that was making the most of legal technology. And so our team looked at this particular form and we've created what we think are some practical solutions to that particular challenge. A couple of things to point out with this form. The first is we have a live database here of various courts. This is reviewed every night, and if there are any changes to court information, that happens automatically. Secondly, in terms of navigation around most forms, it's by a back and next button or via a drop down. However, with this particular form, we've added what we call our bookmarking system. And the first thing I wanted to show you in terms of the bookmarking system is it gives you the ability to navigate precisely to the start of a section. I just need to click onto it and it will take me straight there. Now, in terms of one of the enhancements we've added to this form, if you're used to using other local form applications or indeed downloading the form, at this particular point on page 5, it starts to provide information on properties. So the information is split over 2 pages. We didn't think this was particularly practical. So what we've done is we've changed things around. We've put it all onto the 1 page, and within the Quill Forms version, you have auto calculation. So as I'm adding information into the document, the calculations are flowing through, as you can see there. We've also addressed the issue of where you need additional pages. You would simply copy the page to give you the ability to add in more information. And again, I've done that for you in advance. I've added in those and it's done the calcs. But the other thing that it does is here, it is providing you with a running total. So that's really the core thing that the judge is going to be looking at. We give you that ability to have it there straight away. Another thing that we've looked at was requests from some of our users for the ability to add additional information. So we've put that into place here for you as well, so that you can add things like property valuation dates. Now, given I'm on fairly limited time here, I'm going to quickly jump out of the D81 and talk about FormE. It's worth just mentioning a little bit of the background to FormE to give you some context here. A number of the people within support and indeed myself are ex-OEA people of a number of years standing. And in fact, our head of support was head of support at OEA for something like 20 years. So when he came across into the FormEvo stable, he came across with a number of what he saw as challenges within the OEA application that he wanted to improve here. So that's what we've looked to do. And that gives you the context in terms of some of the development ideas. So here is our form. Again, we've got the databases which are updated every day. But if I take you to the next page, what you'll see is we often found space limitations here. And so we've created extra space for you to add in more children. And indeed, if we had one person who needed more space than that, we can create more space for our users. Literally, one person suggests something, we will consider it and we'll look to make the changes if we can. If I again take you through to property, then again, you've got the auto population of the form, and we've also added in the ability for you to put in additional commentary at that point. And as you need more properties, I can basically insert those and it will auto calculate and take into account all of the properties to give you summations as you work your way through it. The same thing applies if we were to look at pensions. So it's very intuitive in terms of how to deal with some particular challenges you may have with your current forms setup. With FormE and with D81, we have many clients who have put in requests for the ability to share access to this form with their client. So that's where we move into the next stages of the functionality with the bookmarking, as well as the ability for you to navigate through the form. It's also got a traffic light system. Green means this page has been completed, or this section has been completed. Orange, I've started but not finished, and white, I've not finished yet. So you can quickly see what has and hasn't been done. And you can activate the green to say it's completed by simply ticking a box. So if I want to share access to this form with my client, I could give them some general guidance. Please look to have all of this green before you think you've finished. To then share with your client, you would click on the share here. This is available on all of our forms, and so we give you various options. I can share access to a form and they can look at it and comment, but cannot edit, or we can give them the ability to edit and wet ink sign, or indeed we can set it up for e-sign. A couple of points on e-signature. The application has very recently been upgraded and uses advanced level e-signature. That means it uses two-factor authentication. A code is sent to the user's mobile and is inserted prior to having access. So it's got additional security features. Secondly, it's got form customization. We released a e-signable version of FormE over a year ago. And one of the very, very strong requests we've had through from our divorce community has been, we want the ability to be able to separate the audit trail that is created when the form is signed. So you have an audit trail associated with the form, giving you who signed it when, and potentially it can tell you where. And so many people do not want to share audit trails with the other side. And so we have produced a customized version of e-signature that allows the user to have the form signed by the relevant parties. But then in terms of the version that is sent to the other side, it would simply be a signed copy of the form. Nothing else would be associated with it. So it's worth mentioning that. So if we were going to share, I would add my guidance notes here, and I can also share any other documents I want this client to have a look at. I'm now going to come out of this, close the form down, and I'll show you what the client experience looks like. So here's a sample. One big difference. Here, this will be branded with your logo and your details. And we found over the last 18 months, people do not like clicking on links to unknown form providers. So the user sends to the client an email. The email is branded, and then they click on the link, they come through to this page, and they need to log in. And to log in, here's an example of the two-factor authentication. So I need a code that's going to be sent to my mobile. So this has now come through. I'm doing this for real so that you can see it in real time. And the user is now into their forms. So let me just go into draft forms here. There's a sample of the FormE. And this is what the client's got, but they will have your instructions as well. And as I say, the ability to tick boxes, which turns this green, so it gives them less opportunity to miss pages off. And it's just a case then working their way through the form. However, as well as the form and the comments associated with the form, you can also upload documents. So I've got a couple of documents here that the client could look through, and you too can ask for any required documents to be uploaded here. So it gives you a secure route to be able to access additional information and documentation. So let me come back out there and go back into the form itself. A couple of other things to show you. Let's open up the FormE again. We've had many requests for the ability to kind of assist in the form completion status with reminders. And so with our forms, you have the ability to set deadlines. Here is our form deadlines, and essentially treat this as the body of an email. What do you want to say to whom in there, such as, please remember this form needs to be completed by a given date below, insert given date below here, insert email addresses of relevant parties there. However, many users also want to use it as an aide-memoire. So it could well be they're putting notes to themselves, they set their deadline of something that needs to happen, and they click send an alert to myself. At -3 days from this date, the system will automatically send you emails reminding you that this form needs to be completed by the date. So it'll do all of those kind of things for you. Another thing for me risk and compliance aspect is every form has an audit trail. So if I can click here, I can see the form completion history of this form. I can see this person has filled it in. If it was shared internally, I could see that. If it was shared externally, I could see that. And anything that was done with the form, I can see over here. The form itself, in terms of its status, can be classed in different ways. This one is classed as a draft form. When a form is in draft, you have the ability, if I go over to my print to PDF, to create my PDF, what you will see is it has draft watermarks on the left and right hand side. So you can create forms in draft. If I wanted to have a finished version, I can lock the form by finalizing. So here is our form. It is now finalized. And if I go to print to PDF here, we now have a clean version of the form. Some people ask, what happens if I finish a form, lock it, and then realize I've made a mistake? Well, you simply do not panic, because we've created new functionality that now opens up called Unfinalize. I can unfinalize the form, and I can now make any of my changes that I wish to make. So in the brief time I've got for the demo around those two forms, those are the things I wanted to show you. But before I finish off, let me just go back to the presentation. And I wanted to just mention some things that are coming through. Again, these have really been designed based on requirements from divorce lawyers. So the first thing is, which will be coming through in summer, is inline form comments. As it stands, you can add form comments against this particular form. But people have said it would be great if we could add comments against a specific section of a form to provide guidance or clarification. So that's what's coming through. You will have the ability to add notes against a particular section for your client, or indeed you could put them on there so that other people in the firm could benefit from your knowledge. The second thing that we're doing is we're going to give you the ability to control the editorial and form filling capability of your client. So for instance, with your Form E, you'll be able to go through the bookmarking system, and to the left of each section, tick a box if you do not want the client to be able to fill in that particular section. So in terms of when these will be available, I would say probably towards the end of June, we will add these two bits of functionality for you. So I'm conscious of the time that we've got just about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand back to Julian.
Thanks, Paul, and that was very, very helpful. I must admit, albeit not in the family section, but in the probate section, I had reason to use the Quill Forms library just recently, and it was the first time. I'm not a solicitor. It's the first time I had used the forms in anger, so to speak, not in anger with my late mother, but in anger in terms of getting into the detail. And I have to say, it made my life so much easier, and I had an estate value and an understanding of all my allowances, etc., in a very quick time, and it was a very comfortable process to go through in amongst the grief of losing my mother. So, any questions from anybody? I've got a couple of questions that have been sent over to me. Paul, the first question relates to you've got a form in draft, and someone comes along, or legislation comes along and changes the underlying template. What happens to that draft form that you're in the midst of completing and you put to one side, awaiting a query from a client or something?
Sure. So any forms in draft, if there is an amendment to it, the next time you opened up that particular draft form, you would be notified that the underlying form template has changed, and you're given the option to transfer the data from your existing draft to the latest version of the form, or you can remain on the current form, which you may choose to do, but it tends to be mainly with tax forms that you would not change to the latest version of the form. But it's all very simple to do. Takes a couple of seconds to take the data from the old draft into a new version of the form as your latest version of the draft.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, good. Another question here about customizing forms. Can you customize forms? Is that allowed to change a statutory form? How does all that work?
Well, what you can do is you've got the ability to take a form and you could add information to the form that you commonly use time and time again. For instance, if there is a clause that you want to use, add the clause once, and then you can give the form a customized name, such as a D81 XYZ firm's version, and then everyone could use that. A variation on that could be if there are multiple clauses that you tend to use within a form, then you've got the ability to build a customized clause library available either to you, your department, or across the practice. And that way you can select the relevant clause from the options available. The benefit of that is it does give the head of a department the ability to control the additional clauses that are being inserted into forms, rather than just letting people ad hoc add what they feel they want to use.
Okay, that's brilliant. That's really helpful. Any questions from our audience? By all means, use the chat screen to pop in questions. I've got one more. You talked about e-signature there at the end and all that. Just talk to me about sharing forms within the department. If I've got a junior lawyer that I just need to keep an eye on, maybe from a compliance perspective, how does form sharing work within the practice itself, Paul?
There's multiple controls that people can apply. The most basic thing that you can do is with any form, there is an icon that can be added called Share with a Colleague. If you were to click on that button, it then allows you to look at all of your colleagues who have access to Quill Forms, click on the name of that colleague, and it will send them a link to open up the form. A second thing where you want to maybe more formalize the process is you can use what's called peer review. So forms could be completed to draft by an individual, but it then has to be reviewed by a manager prior to being changed to finalized. And finally, if you so wish, you can lock the ability for users to be only able to see their department's forms. So it gives you that control to put what we call ethical walls in place.
So you've got that complete flexibility. On the one hand, you've got control in terms of who sees what, but on the other hand, you've got that compliance layer that makes sure that if necessary, nothing moves along the food chain, so to speak, without somebody checking it first. Yeah, great stuff. Okay, good. I don't think we're going to get any more questions from our audience today, relatively small audience at this sunny lunchtime. So I think I'll just wrap up by firstly saying thank you very much indeed to Paul from FormEvo, who is the business behind our integration with Forms to create Quill Forms. If you're already using Quill Forms, then hopefully this update has refreshed your mind on how things work. If you're not using Quill Forms, the commercial model that we apply is the fees are on a per user using basis. So if a use and use means create, edit, or complete a form, and the monthly fee for use is simply £12 a month, although there is, in all fairness, a minimum fee of £24, equivalent to 2 users in a firm in any given month. And literally you can come and go as you please once you've got set up. So if you are interested, do by all means get in touch with us after today, and we can get you set up very, very quickly, and you'll be using forms very readily and become an expert like Paul. So any final questions, or any colleagues need to tell me about anything I have forgotten?
I was just going to say, if anyone wants,
Paul.
yeah, I was just going to say, if anyone does want a further kind of individual demonstration, we're more than happy to do those, arranged via Becky.
Indeed. So just get in touch, sales@quill.co.uk, and we will do the rest for you.
Indeed.
Lovely. Well, thanks, folks. I think people are beginning to leave now, so we'll say cheerio. Enjoy your lunchtime, and there's more webinars during the course of the week if you want to hear about quill typing and 1 or 2 other bits and pieces. Thank you. Bye bye.